Hello, everyone, and welcome into crushthestreet.com. I'm Kenneth Amaduri, and I'm joined today with a very special guest. We're going to be talking about the economy today, especially as it pertains to Main Street, because Wall Street seems to be doing okay. We have this L-shaped recovery, this liquidity recovery that we are seeing on Wall Street at the moment. But Main Street is struggling. I want to talk to my guest, David Collum, about this. He's with a professor of chemistry and chemical biology at Cornell University. He's someone who writes a yearly review of an annual review on the markets. It's very detailed. I highly recommend people read this. We'll have the links in the description area. And he's become a real thought leader in the investment community, featured on Zero Hedge, Peak Prosperity. And I look forward to speaking with him today. David, thanks so much for coming on Crush the Street with me.
Well, thanks for inviting me. It's my honor.
Well, first of all, David, how are you doing? How are things going under the current circumstances? Obviously, a lot of our lives have been shifted in different ways, whatever that might mean. So we'll start off there.
Well, I'm marginally impacted because I'm an academic. So I'm still collecting salary. And I've been locked down, but here, I'll show your audience. This is what I've been locked down from. I think you can probably see.
Really roughing it, huh?
And I got a couple of extra people here. We've got 6 dogs. We started with 5, and my wife decided that wasn't enough, and so we bought a 6th. So life has been really good, actually. It's kind of almost a trial run on retirement or something. I do work, but it's not the same.
Well, how have things evolved, not just for you, but for your thoughts on the economy from January 2020, moving into February, March, and here we are now, end of May. I mean, have your thoughts evolved and changed? And, what's your insight on what we're seeing at the moment?
Well, with respect to the virus, it depends on the day of the week. So that keeps changing. Every day, I think I've got a beat on it. And then I talk to someone and then I don't. And I've spent hundreds of hours reading about it. The economy I've been unambiguous about in my head. And that is, I think the economy's been undergone a controlled demolition is the phrase that I think is one of the better ones. And there are people who think we're going to V-bounce out of this thing. I think that's essentially an impossibility in my head, right? What's impossible to me often turns out to be true. For example, the markets, right? If you told me we had 35 million people unemployed in a heartbeat and that the markets would be essentially at their all-time highs, right? They're pretty awfully close. I would have said you're nuts. So that shows you how impossible it is to invest rationally, in my opinion.
Well, even Warren Buffett, he's still 40% in cash. And when he was looking for an opportunity to invest, the Fed stepped in and totally took away that opportunity for markets to correct and for valuations to seem attractive to him. So this distortion, what sort of long-term impact is it going to have that the Fed continues to print money? The balance sheet started in 2008 at $800 billion, went up to $4.5 trillion, and then they retraced it to, 3.8 trillion, 3.7 trillion. And then, now it's back to 7 trillion in a heartbeat. I mean, they couldn't even contract it for more than a few months here. And here we are. What are your thoughts on this? And, I assume you would agree that this is why we are seeing markets at all-time highs or near all-time highs.
Yeah, I guess. I'm torn because on the one hand, which says, don't fight the Fed. On the other hand, the Fed, I can't say enough bad things about the Fed. I think that they're a bunch of mid-level bureaucrats in many ways who I don't think know what they're doing. I think they've lost all sight of price discovery, all sight of capitalism. They think that they should set the price of capital. I can't imagine a dumber idea than that. And when the price of capital is wrong or something's wrong in their eyes, they think their job is to fix it. I just don't understand them. Overvaluation is appreciation pulled forward. And so by them constantly trying to keep assets elevated, they just guarantee a much more protracted period of time. So to me, the most dangerous variable of them all is time. It's your friend if you're if you're waiting for something to happen that's good, and it's your enemy if you're waiting for something to happen that's bad. So for a bear, it's a killer, in my opinion. So, and a bear.
So, David, what's your instinct tell you about the long-term view of the stock market? Is it going to reflect the growing M2 money supply, which, continues to grow indefinitely? And, is it basically a dollar devaluation, the stock market reflecting that?
Well, yeah, it appears to. And of course, you never know how to measure dollar devaluation because, there's different readings on inflation. I think my favorite is called the Chapwood Index. And so they can give you the perception of returns if they want to. I'm not 100% convinced because of my disbelief that they're competent. They want to give you perceived returns. They certainly are attempting to debase the currency. It turns out that it's extra legal what they're doing. When they are charged with keeping the dollar stable. And they think that's synonymous with keeping the inflation rate stable. And that's just baloney. I mean, that's just a load of garbage, actually. So they might be able to elevate it, but then what'll happen is your returns are going to stink. I think it'll eventually rot the boomer's nest eggs out if they let it go for 20 or 30 years. If they can somehow pull that off, maybe they can rot the problem away slowly. But that's going to kill us as much as a quick pull the Band-Aid off approach.
And so this is where things get nuanced. Fundamentally, we would look at what the Fed's doing and go, man, that's so bearish. It's very destructive for our economy. But you have the entire world basically following in the footsteps of the US. So relative to other countries, the dollar is the safe haven and is being supported on a relative basis. So how does that dynamic play out? And I know that's a difficult question. It's very nuanced, but I mean, what's your instinct on that?
Well, I think it just means the whole world is screwed up at this point. I think you can have a global inflation problem. The other day, Krugman tweeted something that was just complete nonsense about how you can. I totally disagree. An inflation problem is when people perception of their wealth is inflated relative to what they can actually create by the market system, and we got a lot of people expecting a lot of wealth who aren't going to get it because the global economy can't produce that level of wealth.
That's interesting. A global inflation problem, and how does that create inequalities, or how does that hurt or help people? I mean, who does it help? Who does it hurt when we see this inflation problem happen around the world?
Well, there's this thing called the Cantillon. I might be pronouncing it wrong. The Cantillon Effect, which basically says whoever gets this fresh money first wins. So if you're at the end of the road, you end up getting the inflated dollars. Your buying power stinks. So while the inflation is picking up, the people can get the money and speculate. They can make a lot of money. I don't think this financial engineering ever helps the little guy in the long run. I think what a shock. The little guy eats it yet again. I consider the little guy anyone who's not basically managing serious money at some point. I'm pretty dark about their approach to markets.
But obviously, they do a good job of managing public opinion because people getting a $1,200 check, unemployment boosted. I mean, some people are making more money on unemployment than they were at their job that they lost. So to that extent, some people might feel like they're doing better in this environment.
Maybe, I was at a Greek restaurant last night and the guy was working his butt off. He couldn't keep up with the orders, but the problem is it was him and his daughter, and he can't hire people because they're on comfortable unemployment checks. My advice to listeners, if you've got a kid or something who's getting unemployment checks and their boss wants them to come back, my advice is go back. My advice is go back and collect your unemployment check and work for free, because when it's time to to rehire, guess who that guy's going to hire? They're not going to hire the person who stiffed them when they needed them. So I'd even, tell you, go work for the Greek restaurant guy and get some cash under the table. And when he reopens up in earnest, or when your unemployment check runs out, he'll hire you, not the next clown.
Yeah, that's good advice there. So the US-China trade war, that's been something developing over the last couple of years. And obviously this black swan event with the virus, a lot of optics when it comes to working with China, manufacturing China. China is actually a little bit more ahead in terms of getting their manufacturing going on now. But anyways, what are your thoughts on, this dynamic, China, their role, or how the US is going to fare when it comes to manufacturing? Do you think a lot of companies are going to want to pull back their manufacturing and do the manufacturing here in the US?
Well, in the long run, I think what we've shown is that our entire society is just in time. And that's, just in time inventory. So I perked up about the virus the minute I read that Wuhan closed up. Because my first couple of tweets on the point was, how many parts are there in a car? And the answer is thousands. How many parts come from China? And the answer is thousands. And how many of those parts are optional? And the answer is thousands, none. And so and how many of those parts come from Wuhan? And the answer is undoubtedly more than one. And so I realized that you break the supply chains, you break the system. And I haven't seen it as bad as I thought it was going to be, although there's people saying we can't get chips and we can't get this. And there are gaps still. There could be a delayed reaction. I could be wrong. But I think China may be actually using this tactically as part of the trade war. So I think they might have said, look, we'll shut down, we'll trigger everyone else to shut down, then we'll spring open. And an authoritarian government, which I actually think we're getting closer to that now. But China is there. They can make everyone go back to work. And so by baiting us all into shutting down and then opening up rather abruptly, it was a pretty good tactical move, right?
Yeah, but at what expense?
What does China value, right? So they had the one child policy. How many daughters got drowned in the Yangtze because of that, right? They've got gulags. They're attempting to look Western, but it can be a pretty barbaric place at times, right? The wet markets, right? All you have to do is look at a wet market. Holy cow, I wouldn't eat that stuff. So I think they can be ruthless. I think we can be ruthless. So in some sense, I'm not discriminating against China, but I have no doubt that they could exact a toll on their population to achieve a long-term goal. I think we would do that.
David, what does your instinct tell you about where things are headed in terms of freedoms and in result of this crisis? I mean, we're approaching 40 million people filing for unemployment since the beginning of this crisis out of a 160 million person workforce. What does your instinct tell you about possible policies, government growing, and just trends that you see happening as a result of this?
Well, there's no such thing as a temporary government program. So every time I go through the airport, up until lately, the TSA guys are still there. It's still terribly wasteful. We still get patted down and scanned and things like that. And so I think we should oppose crackdowns on the virus that represent really crackdowns on us. I'd rather risk my life. I'm in a risk group, right? I'm in the age bracket where not only could you die, but you're likely to die a more painful death. If I was 87, I'd probably just shoot up down the tubes like a bobsled run. If you're 30, you survive. But I was told by a biochemist, he said, you don't want to get it at our age. He said, you'll battle it for a couple of months, and then you might make it, you might not, and you'll be a basket case. So, but I think we should resist the loss of civil liberties. Always, you never get them back. So you should always resist it. And, I think you should quarantine sick people, not healthy people. I think, people are always saying, well, I just would rather stay home. And I go, well, then stay home, right? You can quarantine yourself. If you're worried about your parents, keep them home. But I want to open up, and it's not to say it will necessarily be easy. I talked with a doctor yesterday, and he said, look, harsh reality is got to have a lot of dead people before this is over. That was the doctor's analysis. He says to get from here to herd immunity, to the extent that it's possible, and it's still being debated, there's dead people, right? There's going to be fatalities. And it's, in many ways, it's no different than when Eisenhower dropped people on Omaha Beach, right? The safest thing to do in World War II would be to never get in it. The safest thing to do would be to surrender in every war. But we choose quality of life versus quantity of life all the time. And
Right.
and that's what we have to choose this time too.
Well, and there's this assumption and this backstop that we assume is just okay and a given, and that's the government bailing out the people, which is a taxpayer. It's all circular, right? But this assumption that we are guaranteed this perfect world, this world that maybe we had a few months ago, that we're guaranteed tomorrow. That doesn't really exist. And then you tell the restaurant owner that he can't run his business. You know, he poured his savings, who knows how many years that represented, and to just destroy these people's careers and their businesses. Who's to do that? How can we do that to people? And just this assumption again that we are guaranteed this perfect life. I don't know if that's true. This is a brand new thing. It's philosophical, you know, and there's no moral code, I guess, to kind of look towards and say, okay, this is what we're supposed to do.
Well, we're never guaranteed anything, right? Mother Nature's fair but not benign. And yeah, again, back to that Greek restaurant owner, he's probably going to go out of business because he can't pay his rent and keep his business. He can't make enough money being his own cook, his own server, his own everything. And so I think there'll be a lot of destroyed mom and pop operations. Why was McDonald's allowed to stay open when we had a whole bunch of local restaurants that were shut down? I didn't see people at the grocery stores keeling over dead. I didn't hear rumors of them keeling over dead. So why is a grocery store important, but an optometrist is not? I had trouble finding an optometrist, and my wife's glasses broke. Why is it not possible for someone running a hair salon to say, look, I'm wearing a mask. I'm voluntarily taking the risk. My customers are voluntarily taking the risk. And if we got to get to herd immunity anyways, I don't see the logic in the shutdowns at this point. I did see the logic for a little while, because it was so unknown. I think to say, look, everyone go to your houses, just stop, get inside, let's find out what's going on. But then it got politicized, as everything does. Everything starts as a movement, becomes a business, and ends up in a racket. That's, I think, an Eric Hoffer quote. And now it's left, right, left wing, right wing. I mean, it's just appallingly left wing, right wing. The right wants out, the left wants to shelter. As I've said in other podcasts, if you are supporting a decision because of your support for or disdain for Trump, you're a bad person. You're throwing people under buses, whether it's risking their lives or whether it's destroying their careers, regardless of your view. If you are supporting, for example, I tend to be an open up guy. If you're supporting sheltering because you think the silver lining is Trump won't get reelected, you're a bad person. You should check your morals at the door. It's an inexcusable view to view that. You should be making your decision based on what's best. And based on people's lives, based on destroyed lives, based on lost lives, and trying to figure out what's the best answer. I don't care about Trump. I don't make my decisions based on whether I like Trump or dislike Trump.
Yeah. David, what is your thoughts on gold and silver in this environment?
Oh, you got a Fed or a bunch of idiots who've gone so far outside the box. I don't see how you can possibly not own it. I mean, it may not go up. I mean, I thought the equity markets couldn't possibly go up, and they did. And so maybe gold can't go up, even though it absolutely should. But you gotta have some coverage. It might be hard to buy now. My cost base has started at 270, so it's a lot easier for me to enthusiastically, white knuckle gold now, because I'm giving up handsome returns if it goes down. But you got to buy something. You got to buy some asset to protect against inflation, because inflation can show up very abruptly. It really can spring out of nowhere. The people who say, the money velocity is not very high, and therefore we won't have inflation. You look at Weimar Germany, the money velocity tanked several times, and then it just took off. It just took off, and it took off in a matter of weeks. It took off, and so don't anyone who doesn't fear inflation doesn't understand, or as Joe Biden would say, is not an economist.
Joe Biden. Wow. Well,
Mark, what did he know, and when did he forget it?
It is gonna be an entertaining election cycle. I gotta be honest. I am looking forward to seeing how this plays out. I was looking forward to in-person live debates, though. I don't know if that's going to happen. We'll be interested to see how this affects Trump's popularity. Some say, the economy getting hurt was Trump's Achilles heel, and I would have agreed with that. But because people can step back and, deflect it to the virus, I don't know if it's going to affect his chance of reelection. I don't know if you want to go down that rabbit hole or not, but that's just my opinions.
I was arguing with someone the other day. If you ask who has been most supportive of opening it up, it's been Trump. And so I think that if the voting masses conclude that the most problematic thing in this whole fiasco was the sheltering and the shutdown, and if they conclude that destroyed their well-being, their ability to feed their kids, this is an awful situation. And they're not going to be able to go back and find clips of Trump doing anything but saying, we've got to get our economy going. This is not good. And there's all sorts of clips of other people supporting the sheltering. So I'm not convinced that a bad economy can't be hung on the opposing team. It's a complicated thing. But the other thing is, once again, the Democrats, who historically I've not agreed with their politics, but they've never looked incompetent to me, but they've yet again picked a wretched candidate. I could have even in theory voted for Bernie, as crazy as that sounds. In theory, if I'd concluded Trump was just too nuts, I didn't. But and I talked to my brother, who's a right winger too, and he said the same thing. But they threw us Hillary. Hillary, to me, is the moral bottom of the barrel. She is so sociopathically, she's a criminal, in my opinion. And so I'm going, okay, so the Democrats have learned, pick a better candidate. They needed a progressive candidate, right? That's what the party's calling for. That's what the people are calling for. And what do they come up with? A child molesting, marble deficient old white man, right? I can't believe how bad a choice this is.
Do you think it got out of the hands, though, of the Democrats, that it just that's how the chip settled?
No. Remember, when they didn't want Howard Dean, they took him out. When they didn't want Tulsi Gabbard near the podium, they took her out. And the primaries of 2016 showed us anything, is that the primaries are rigged up the gazoo, right? So that, they failed to beat Trump because they had never seen anything like him. But they certainly made sure Bernie didn't get there, and they made sure he didn't get there again. And I think they astutely knew that he could destroy the party because he's so far to the left. But no, I think they could have gone with someone else. I think they could have just told Biden, go home, right? Just bow out. They did that with all the others. And they could have, I think they're going to slip Cuomo in. That's my thesis. I think they're going to slide Cuomo in.
David, you mentioned something about how quickly things can change. Millennials largely don't own gold or silver. They're, living in tiny homes, and most of them don't have money, riding scooters and all these different things. They're just, gold and silver are not what millennials focus on. It's not an interest to them. But if we go through a massive inflationary period, I feel like just as quickly as we saw our economy go from quote unquote booming to bust, yeah. I think millennials are going to get a quick education on the importance of hard assets. And
here's the problem. They don't have any money. as you said, they don't have any money. So the price, there's nothing out there except for maybe scooters that are going to move in price because the millennial horde moving towards it right now. They've been hurt pretty good. I'm not sure which generation is. Let's call it youngsters, right? The youngsters are not collecting the resources sufficiently to move markets. So the money's still in the hands of the old guys and way in the hands of the leveraged speculators. So that's what Powell did. Powell has destroyed price discovery by making capital so available. Capital should not be easy to get. The free market should make capital precious so that good ideas, get it, and bad ideas get filtered out because of fear of losing the money. And the Fed has negated that process completely. And so now there's stupid ideas being chased down by the dumb money. That's how the private equity model works. It's easy money chasing assets and then selling them the shells of companies off the dumb money. That's the evils of the Fed. They financialized our entire economy. So everything revolves around liquidity. When you hear people talk about, so the Fed puts trillions into the market, not 1 cent of that is really directed towards wealth creation. They're just replacing lack of wealth creation with money. So what good does that do? That's just an inflationary bulge. It's a wealth redistribution. Carnival Cruise Line should have burned in hell. They did not. The airline should have just gone through bankruptcy because they were managed poorly. They were managed exceedingly poorly. And so along comes a virus, and they were too shock sensitive, and they should have been, and there would have been lost jobs. They would have been new owners.
David, going back to just how quickly things have changed, what does that tell you about the future? I mean, we went from this seemingly booming economy to just the biggest, contraction in the swiftest, quickest amount of time we've ever seen. What is this teaching people in terms of recency bias and just things to look out for? And, what are your thoughts on this? Kind of, maybe in a closing roundabout way here. I mean, how should investors think about what we are seeing right now going into 2020 into 2021?
Well, my timescales are longer than 20 and 2021, but I thought we were going to go through a Japanification of the economy back coming out of 08, 09. I thought the bad call I made was I just didn't believe the Fed would do what they did. And I don't think they can pull it off again, despite the fact that is the prevailing wisdom, which is probably exactly why I'm right on this one, because prevailing wisdom is not wisdom. So I think we are going to Japanify our way through a number of years, and I think we're just going to suck, and we're just going to be stuck in the mud.
And tell people what that means. Japanification.
Japanification is where they fail to sort of flush the bad debt out. They fail to, when you save a banking system, for example, that's limping along, and one of the things you do is you end up with a banking system that's not very aggressive, that's not very vibrant, that can't do what banks do. If you protect zombie companies, they cannibalize business. So if you keep all the restaurants alive by providing some sort of stimulus, and there isn't the demand for it, then every last restaurant, no matter how good they are, ends up getting gutted because there just isn't enough demand. And so you really got to let the failures fail, and you got to let the survivors win, and you got to keep culling the herd, or you'll have famine. And I think we'll have famine, because I think these idiots at the Fed are determined to keep the system going on their watch. I think it's a kind of a cowardice.
David, I want to appreciate you for coming on Crush the Street with me today and sharing your wisdom with us and your insights on the market. I feel like so many people, if Trump was to talk like this about the economy, so many people wouldn't understand the context behind it. But we're talking about deeper things that people need to understand. So I appreciate that. If people want to learn more about you, the work you do, where would they go and what would they expect to find?
Well, the work I do is technically, I'm a chemist, so I wouldn't bother to look there. You can find me on Twitter under David B. Collum, and that's where most of the noise is coming out. And then once a year, I write that annual review, which is kind of the way I sort it out in my head. I'm not convinced this year's is going to be interesting because there's nothing more boring than a society in which everyone's locked in their house. So what entertaining stuff can happen when we're all locked in our house, right? So I think this one might be a shorter one than normal because I'm not just going to go plowing through stats on COVID again. Can't do that. So I've got the plots beneath the plots. I'm working on wealth creation, ideas on wealth creation, stuff like that, and just-in-time inventory. I've got some ideas I think are semi-fresh, and I'm in formulating them.
All right, David. Well, I appreciate you coming on Crush the Street. Thank you for your time, and be well, and look forward to your next review.
Thank you very much.